give it a new perspective, a new direction. That's what Adi is good at. So that's what's going to happen. So
I'm
Adi,
very
first of
happy
all,
to bring my two hands. Please, over to you.
thank you very much, Adi, of course, for being part of various other events, and of course this one. And it's always been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, it's just been so nice. Of course, you're busy, you're a busy person, so we haven't had too many conversations for some time also, but you've been there. So thank you very much, Adi. And you have to tell us about yourself and then language and mediation.
Thank you for having me, Vikram, and whoever is watching live or recorded. I guess it will be available recorded. I have a déjà vu every time you invite me to introduce myself, because it feels like we were kind of, with the same group of colleagues and friends. But nevertheless, I'm very happy to say just a couple of things about myself. I'm a full-time mediator. I have been in the field for 20 years, last April. A scary moment some 10 years ago when I decided to go full-time. I am really, really excited about having made this my day job. And what can I tell you? It's just never feels like I'm working. It's both a job and a passion. So that's it. Otherwise, I am sometimes discussing with young mediators or experienced mediators about how we can improve our approach, or other mediation users discussing about how we can get better in using mediation, including mediators, by the way. Advising, working with ADR Center's team, Leonardo D'Urso, and our team to help governments and other organizations incorporate mediation in their policies, in the way disputes are being addressed, not only through traditional litigation, but also through the intention of building some agreements, some peace, some consensus. It's more lately more organizations with many employees, with many clients, if you will, that are more and more interested in thinking how can they get better in really preventing disputes rather than addressing disputes. And that, I think, requires support from experienced professionals, not only mediators, but could be facilitators or negotiators, lawyers, other types of expertise could be helpful. So this is it. This is what I'm doing, but I'm trying to make it more mediation if possible, rather than training and consultancy.
Great, Adi. Of course, it's nice to have someone who's taken it up as a day job, so that like I keep saying that's rare in the world. So that's something which I'm trying to do my little bit to change that. But this is what we are doing, language and mediation. And of course, Adi is going to give us his interesting perspective. But Adi, what maybe just 30 seconds, I just like to put up my website there just to tell people that it's best to find information there rather than social media posts, because you miss out on them. But I think one good way is also to subscribe to the channel, because what happens is that whenever something is scheduled, you get a notification. So that's also a good way to do it. I don't know what people are, how they find information, but I would like them to do it without me putting out posts. So it's simple, mediatorvikram.com, nothing complicated about that. And for everything. So, but this World Mediation Circle, Romania Mediation Circle, we have to have a conversation on this at some stage. Maybe today also we can have it later on. And newsletter, LinkedIn newsletter, like you can do, of course, support. I keep asking people, Patron, I want them to become. And all links are there to various events, YouTube playlist or schedule. You get to know about the people. So there's 500 plus videos now. So there's lots of links, lots of things happening there. But Adi's been on the first symposium, Mediation in our Culture and Traditions, then Mediator Experiences, and the symposium after that. So Adi's been there. Jennifer is here. I don't know if she's somewhere there. If she wants to say hi to us, it's up to her. So Adi, It's all yours. Language and mediation, please.
Well, let me start. Let me walk my talk, Vikram, and ask you, how did you come up with this topic?
What happens with me is I look at the international days, and 21st is the International Day of Mother Language. So I said language is something which, again, different perspective people will bring, but I think there's lots which can come out from there. Lots of interesting things. So let's put it out. So that's why it's simple, nothing very complicated.
It's a great idea. I was just curious how you came up with it. Having been mediated in many countries and with participants speaking probably more than 15 languages to date, at least, and having been working with interpreters extensively in mediation, I think that this is a huge topic. It relates to the topic of culture, but it goes beyond that. I see two dimensions. So let me start it with two ideas that come to mind, but feel free to come in and then state your comments, and perhaps Jennifer and I see Helen also joining. Others that may be interested to contribute. I'll be very happy to discuss your views. So the first point refers to situations when we have participants that speak our own language, and the language that we use, it's really important in actually describing the meanings of participants in mediation, what they really, well, we can hear what they're saying, but do we understand what they're really saying, right? So that's the point. How can we use the language and our position as a mediator to really facilitate that understanding? Because people can listen to each other, people can hear each other, but do people understand each other? And sometimes, we see mediations where parties are repeating, and you feel like, why are you repeating yourself? Why would you say the same thing like the fifth time, and so on? Well, perhaps they don't feel like they were understood. So the language that we use to mirror what they say, to summarize, to make sure that the meaning is understood by us, at least for starters, and then by the other participants, could be something helpful in our work. So really understanding the meaning of the words that are being used. So that's one point, and it goes back to the the fundamental role of a mediator. But the second point refers to participants that do not speak the same language like ours. And that's when it becomes interesting, because you may speak their language, but it's not your mother tongue language. For example, English is not my mother tongue language, that's Romanian, obviously. And when you would have participants that speak English, like native English participants, that's going to be very different than having only Romanian participants, right? Or participants that speak Romanian. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that you have participants that speak other languages, maybe Serbian, Bulgarian, Georgian, whatever, Turkish. Well, you may use English to communicate with them through interpretation, may it be simultaneous or consecutive. Well, in that case, there is another person, or could be more than one, could be two or more interpreters that are basically bridging the communication process, and their own ability to use language becomes critical, right? And it happens to have different types of quality in terms of interpretation services in mediation. from excellent to not so good. And obviously that requires a lot of preparation, working with interpreters, making sure that participants understand how we approach the communication process and how we use the language, making sure that everyone feels comfortable. One example comes to mind with the case that referred to the oil extraction industry and their engagement, their community engagement. There were community members that felt concerned in this case that the oil extraction technologies of this company was inducing earth tremors. They were calling it earth tremors, right? Should I ask you how the company was calling them instead of earth tremors?
Let's hear that.
Well, it was, I think it's quite obvious. They were calling them earthquakes, and they said that they were natural, and that, you know, I just realized when I'm sharing this example, the tragedy that is going on in Turkey and Syria. And I just wanted to push pause for a moment just to say that it's so tragic, and just to wish everyone to cope with this situation, and to take a moment and hope that the whole world will learn from this, including construction technologies.
Yeah, I think that's the important one, to be able to, in this day and age, construction technology where it is, and only largely because of that, I mean, these things happen and we don't learn from it. It's not that we learn from it, it's those.
Yeah, just you know, taking a moment to think about all that were lost and their, you know, family members and friends that are still alive, and I hope they get the support that they need, and everyone who was affected, really, because I'm sure that there are so many homeless people because of this, and that were whose lives were affected in ways that we cannot even imagine. Anyway, going back to the example, the company was calling them earthquakes. Well, everyone was looking at us. How would we call them? And obviously, you can imagine, Vikram, that it was an interpreter using the local language. Well, the company was looking to see if we would call them earthquakes, because then we would kind of favor their perspective, while the community members were, you know, they were looking forward to see that we would use earth tremors, the word. Well, we used earth movement. That's the term we used. And then they reflected and they said, we understand what you're doing. Now we really understand what you're doing. You're not here to take any sides. You're trying to help us, really. And they said that after we told them why we used that word, so that they really understand our thinking pattern, our mindset in the way we were trying to help them achieve some progress. It goes back to the core topic for conversation today, language. And how important is it? You know, one word can actually change everything. But when we say language, I think we can also include body language, which adds a completely different dimension. Sometimes just an eyebrow misplaced can also change things in the way people look at us and our world. So these are just some initial reflections I wanted to share.
Okay. And let me just tell you, Adi, actually Helen's session is at 8:30. I hope she hasn't got the time wrong, because she's in Canada. I hope but her audio hasn't connected, so I don't know whether Helen, can you hear us? She can't hear us. And I think Jennifer has been called by Helen, so that's how it is. No, I think this is what the important thing is, that like you said, one word can change things. I mean, I'm sure these are, if we can't go back into history and record what some war started, maybe it started because of that one word, and lives are lost and everything happens. So I think these are important discussions to have. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Jennifer and Helen would be willing to contribute, that would be great. Otherwise, feel free to just observe. That's absolutely fine. And others also. I'm not sure if you're seeing comments.
I will see. I will have a look. If
Vikram,
something comes up, I'll definitely let you know.
where you're sharing this feed. But yeah, let's incorporate any other idea that may emerge. I have one actually. While you were saying you were making your last point, Vikram, I'm thinking about whether participants that use mediation or some form of dialogue intervention. I keep using this concept, mediation with capital M. I don't really refer to mediation as the professional services we're offering. Sometimes they can be offered by someone who's not so neutral, and I think could be just as effective, in the right circumstances, obviously. Because it goes back to the way, communities were resolving things. And sometimes the mediators were not so neutral as we would think. They were more like, they would have power. So mediators as authorities could be another concept that we could discuss perhaps a different time. Or mediators as activists, looking at power imbalances, which is another huge conversation. That should immediately prompt ethical dilemmas for us as mediators. Anyway, going back, the very beneficiaries of this, of our work, do they think about language? Are they really aware of all the different terms that can happen in a dialogue process because of a word or because of a gesture or because of the lack of language? And that perhaps may refer to mediation advocacy or making sure that participants have informed advisors to help them, or coaches to help them use this effectively. It may refer to their general life experience, their own ability to really understand how important is it to think about the way you can still be assertive, but you can be that in a way that would not enable defensive mechanisms from the other side. That's the whole thing. So what kind of language can we use to do that? Because no one is actually saying, well, you don't have to, it's all Mozart and Kumbaya and, no, that's not it. No one is actually asking you to just give up your, to show your hand too early, to feel vulnerable or to be taken advantage of. The question is, how can you still address your interests without, the other party feeling like you're out to get them? What do you think, Vikram? I saw you wanted to come in for a couple of
I was more coming into earlier when you used the word neutral. I said that the fact that we are putting out all these words to the user, the words themselves, do they really mean anything to them? Do they actually need to get into it? I mean, that by itself is a whole area of discussion, because all the models that are thrown at them, whether, I mean, I don't even know how confused they are because of that. What are they expecting? So I'm just thinking that language also has to be simplified, because neutrality is a symposium that I had, neutrality and mediation. We discussed just that one word. And we had, of course, I think there were 14, 15 speakers, but Bernie Mayer has written a lot about it. So he was there. He's written his last book, Neutrality Trap. He's spoken about it, social change, and in those areas, power imbalances and all those things. So I think that part needs to be really looked at, Adi, because we really feel if we have to, in the mediation world, it's nice to have discussions and everything, but are we confusing the user? So that part, I think you need to also maybe cover somewhere.
Well, where can I start? I think it depends on the user. Some users do need me to label myself as neutral. Some actually count on it. I think each forum has to fit the fuzz. And I think it's about us really understanding the expectation from what users should be, satisfied and comfortable with whatever we're offering. So if the language that they're using is, we would like a neutral, so on and so forth. And if we're like in a very mature market where that's the term used, that will be fine. It'll be great. It has been used. It is being used for years and years, and it's working. So that's fine, at least for them. And we know that many mediators and arbitrators and dialogue facilitators are found in panels of neutrals, as they're labeled. But if you travel in this community somewhere in some part of the world to discuss with community members and leaders about whatever conversation about this large footprint project that was funded by the World Bank and that they have sent complaints about, and they're in response to their complaint, an assessment is being conducted to whether they'll be interested to engage in dialogue. I think they will say is, who's paying you? Okay, and you will say, well, the same bank where you sent the complaint. Yeah, and they say, but didn't that bank fund the project we're complaining about? So basically, the same bank is putting money in the pocket of the organization that is implementing that project. Is that correct, Mr. Neutral? And you say, yes, that's correct. Well, they're not so happy with the word in this case. So that's what I'm saying. We have to, rather than us really judging whether a word is appropriate or not, perhaps we should be getting familiarized with the expectation, with whatever understanding is there on the other side of the dialogue process, and use the words that people would understand and would be comfortable with. And then, of course, going back to this example, you will obviously have to say, well, let me tell you that because of this willingness that the bank would support my traveling and being over and discussing with you, that is while we are able to have this conversation. And with respect to my objectivity, see, I have just used a different word language-wise. It's going to be a different word that I would use, which probably is easier to be digested by some people. With respect to my objectivity, let me just tell you that the fact that I am paid by the bank, the lender that supported the project you're complaining about, shouldn't affect my ability to remain objective. And I can preach about that for a long time, but perhaps you would like to give me a chance. Just give me a chance. Let's have this conversation. And at the end of this conversation, you can reflect. You can let me know if you would be comfortable, for me to continue to support this process or other mediator. And obviously, if this is going to go ahead, you would always have the possibility to change the mediator or even stop the process if you think that's not working for you. So basically, whatever language I would use, I would shy away from making it so much about the language, and I would actually go to discuss the meaning of that language. And perhaps this should be interesting for you and even for others that may be watching this. There was a time that I wouldn't even write mediator on my business card. I would just write my name and my number. Thank you very much. That's it. I would not even label myself, and sometimes I would use that business card so that people would not be confused about the way I would identify myself. And I would probably share that, I would, hand that business card whenever it was asked of me. Do you have a number? Sure, my number is here. And that's it. Perhaps my organizational number, and that's it. It goes back to the same language confusion that I think you're successfully addressing with this series, Vikram.
Because I tell you, for me, of course, there's Roshan. I don't know whether I've pronounced her word. She's in Ireland. Her name I sometimes don't get right. So Roshan, she's put a comment. We'll get to her comment but I'm just thinking from what this particular World Bank thing. For me, look, ultimately, it is about telling people that you have to develop the trust. And if you trust me, you continue with the process. This is not a process which is you are bound for sure. So just that is for me that word. For me, that's the connection. Everything else will be debatable. Roshan definitely thinks that neutral is something that we need to put up front. I mean, do we really? I mean, like I said, we have those sessions lying there. Have a look at them. See what people have said about neutrality. Then we can talk about it, because I don't want to get into that discussion to tell her about it. But on the neutral part of it, definitely I will want her to have a look at it, and then we can get her into a debate on that later. But she says, in terms of what models a mediator uses, a user doesn't need to know this. There is terminology that really only means something to mediators and is just not relevant to mediators. So that's the kind of thing I'm trying to say, that they don't, I mean, does it really mean anything to people, what the words that we use with them? So maybe let's simplify that. But I mean, Roshan and me, I think we have a little difference of the way she looks at legislation and mandatory mediation. We've had some discussions on that, but there's another debate. So, but at least I'm happy she agrees on one part. I'm really happy about that. Yeah. So trust for me is the factor that basically should be, and I feel is the real thing to connect on. And once that is there, everything just falls into that. I mean, that nothing else is required. No one's asking you about neutrality, about anything else. It's just that connection. I mean, that's my feeling. I mean, I'm sure you will have your views on that.
No, I agree. I think that's it goes. Yeah, labeling is a sometimes a tricky tendency that we have, and really thinking through when we need to label things can make a huge difference. And obviously every word almost would be labeling something, would be labeling a meaning. So really understanding, the meaning of the words we're using, and then staying curious and saying, Vikram, you used this word. What did you mean by that? Just to make sure that I'm really understanding not, the meaning of the word, but the meaning of your point. Because obviously I would understand every single word, but altogether your point may be somewhere else than I think, it is. And that for me, that staying curious, always checking, perhaps even asking clarifying questions. Is this what you're saying? Just to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly. And perhaps that's a significant part of our job as mediators. Because, and it happens to us every day when we're discussing with our family members, with our friends, with our, sometimes people are not making points that are so obvious, like crystal clear, really. Sometimes people are making fuzzy points on purpose. They want us. It's just, they're testing our understanding. They're just trying to see if our heart and mind are where they would hope that we could be. And sometimes we're successfully failing those exercises, just, whether we're whatever. I mean, we may be, there are a million reasons for us to not pick the right cue, and we're not living up to the standard or to the expectation. So I think that's what contributes to conflict in many cases. And here we are now in other people's conversations, trying to help them And obviously, that's where we should start, you know.
Yep.
And going back to those, you know, there is something that I've learned in a case. Someone said, we all have the right to have an opinion, but we don't have the right to have our own set of facts. Okay. And that's perhaps the starting point. What are the facts that, I mean, and they usually are in the past, right? I mean, all the things that have happened. What is relevant about, you know, before we would even discuss things in the future, what is relevant about what happened in the past, and really unpacking some of the words, some of, you know, the terms that are used really to, you know, they're often segues towards emotions, towards things that are not so material, but are helping us understand how parties have perceived things that have happened in the past. You know, all that are, and also adding to the whole facts conversation, because we're understanding not only what happened, but how people recollect what happened and how that makes them feel. And then perhaps we're prepared to discuss about what is it that we disagree, which is another significant part of consensus building. You know, before we would jump to discussing solutions, did we even agree what is that we disagree? And we know as professionals that if you ask that exact question, that will create a huge debate. Parties would probably use different language. It goes back to one of the key competencies of a mediator. Your ability to use language to frame an agenda of topics for conversation is critical. So it goes back to language. The way we, you know, we make sure that when we say, okay, so the first thing we would like to discuss is so-and-so, and the second thing is so-and-so, without kind of, you know, creating that perception of someone that we're kind of favoring them, or we're kind of ignoring their point on this. It's holistic, it's inclusive, and it gives ownership, you know, to all participants in the conversation. That's a language skill altogether. It's way more than a legal skill.
I'm happy, but at least you use the word participants, because look, the word neutral, the word parties, mediation developing in the shadows of the court system and coming from there, that language which has got carried forward. And I'm saying that neutral is carried forward from there. Parties definitely is carried forward for there. So I've been talking about it, and this comes from that World Mediators Conference when Jeannie was there. She said we use the word participants and we don't say opening statement, we say orientation. So I think that part of it also can have a very good impact on the participants when you are using language which is different. So they look at the process differently. If you're still continuing from that court system and that whole language, and like I said, I don't want it to be developing in the shadows there, but that's another fight which I've been having. I've been shouting, screaming, rants I have, but I'll keep doing that. But I think that part of it, that language from that perspective really needs to be looked at by mediators, and they have to look at it. Yeah. Yeah.
There is confusion even with this word, participants, and I'll tell you why. It disregards participants that are really making decisions, the very participants that I get my mandate from as a mediator, from other participants that are there to advise, to observe, to support, and that are not parties in that sense that we would, you know, they are obviously part of this, you know, organization. They're legal advisor, human resource manager, whatever, the CEO, or no, not the CEO, they're technical advisor. However, it's the CEO or whoever is, you know, member of the board or high officer that you know represents the organization and speaks for the team. Yeah, I think we can make it easy for people to understand that for us, everyone is, we're all here trying to support the same process. We're all here trying to help, this situation, make progress with it. And obviously, regardless of our roles, we're just, every idea matters, and everyone will have a voice. And thank you for being here. And let's work together towards that goal. So that spirit, I think, would kind of, encourage everyone to participate, regardless of their rights of ownership, if you will.
So that's interesting. I think this is, again, I think an interesting point to discuss, because, well, like you said, the party is the organization, and these people represent that organization. And one of them, or maybe more than of them, can be decision makers in that organization. So in that sense, also, I think participants is a better thing to use, because the company cannot be sitting there as the legal entity cannot be sitting there in a mediation. So it's the people. And these people are not the parties. They're not the party. They are the, again, representing. So I feel that participants seems to be quite, I like that concept, that not, and it's not just the organizational representatives. It could be the lawyers also. It's the experts that you might bring in to bring this whole thing out, that we're all working together to reach something. We're all part of it. Not that, like, the lawyers think that they have, some of them don't know what role they have in a mediation. First of all, that by itself is an area which is developing now with a mediation advocacy and all. But if that terminology can help them understand that they are part of the process and they're working together on it, I think it can give a good direction to mediation. And that's why I said the court system and the language that it has brought, it will be difficult to get rid of it, because the same people have come into the practice maybe, and they've carried that terminology with them. Of course, I mean, that's your thoughts. Roisin has some other, so she had put some comment there. I'll get to that comment, because I'm having a look at the Mediation Act, because she's looked at the Ireland Mediation Act, and we did have a discussion on this as part of neutrality and mediation, because what is the term used there and what are they required to do under the Act. So that was something we did look at, but I'll come to that. I'll also have a look at it while we're talking, because the word neutral, as I understand, is not mentioned there, but some people believe that maybe that's the way we have to, the word they have to use, because I did specifically have a look at this. So I'm just thinking that we'll have a look at it. Roshan, if you're watching, please just tell me if the word neutral was used anywhere in the Act. Yeah, but let me also, just to also tell you, Roshan, that she's also an artist. Let me also tell you that. And a good artist. She does, I think, largely, I think she does watercolors. That's Roshin. That's the work that she does. And
sending all the best, Roshin. We're in touch, and she's a great mediator, and doing a great job in leading the organization. I think if you look at the literature, you will see that there are so many ways that mediation is defined that the world is still making up its mind about that. And obviously, different countries would pass legislation that would define the process and the role of the mediator so differently that sometimes no one is, really clear about, where this is going. I'll give you another example, because I use that example with accountability mechanisms of development banks. And they started in the last 5 to 10 years more and more to use different types of dialogue-based interventions. May there be mediation, dispute resolution, problem-solving initiatives. So these are all terms that are used for the same process: facilitation, dialogue facilitation, and so on and so forth. So there are so many terms that are used to define this process that at some point the question is, are we helping potential users to really understand what this is by using all these terms, or we're rather creating more confusion? I think this is not about either. I think it can be, variety is helpful, but at the same time, variety can create confusion. So really working together and for every single case, finding the right language that works for the people, as you mentioned it, not parties or participants, for the people that we're engaging, that perhaps is the way to go. And if they want to use problem solving, if they want to use dispute resolution, if they want to use conflict management, that's fine. That's what we'll use. Mediation, whatever word to describe whatever. I'll give you an example. It was this organization that was part in this mediation that I was facilitating, I was managing, and with another colleague from another country. And this CEO of this organization said, this is not conflict management for us. We don't have a conflict. We're here to listen to, you know, whatever the other party or whatever they are claiming to be a concern, and to discuss that concern and to make sure we really understand what that means and to see if we can work together some way forward. But that we don't think that we're here to address conflict. We're here to communicate. I mean, you're helping us do that.
I think, yeah. No, I think this aspect of the legislation, I think this is a thing we need to discuss, because legislation, to a certain extent, in countries which have signed the Singapore Convention, they will be looking at ratifying it, and at that time they'll be looking at the domestic law, and the terminology there definitely is important. But let's just put up what Ireland has, because Royshin has spoken about it. I'll just put that up because this is important as to what they have put. Let's have a look at it. So mediator shall, prior to the commencement of the mediation, make such inquiry as it is reasonable in the circumstances to determine whether he or she may have any actual or potential conflict of interest. No issue. Perfect. Not a problem. Then what else? What do you think other things here that you feel can go into a direction which, I mean, neutral is not a word I see here for sure. I mean, I'm just thinking that word, because of the fact that she's in that, I'll read her what she said, but I don't think, I think legislation has understood that. That is what you're trying to make them aware of. And then just look at this, the number B. That's it. Act with impartiality and integrity and treat the parties fairly. Now, whether impartiality by itself can be debated, whether it's omnipartiality is being discussed, multi-partiality is being discussed, that's another debatable topic. And I'm not saying they have got it right. Have they got it right? Is it an issue? Is impartiality possible? Is it required? All those things we need to debate. I mean, what is happening is we pick up from somewhere and say, oh, this is it. They've used it. That's it. Let's debate these things. I mean, I don't think it's so easy to just put it out there, because we don't know who's, I know in India, there's a bill which has been drafted. And if I look at it, I know these people have not understood what's really, what is required in relation to mediation. This is the colonial concept of let's legislate. Let's, in the legislation, put an option to make regulations. And in those regulations, let's talk about how online mediation has to be conducted. The user, look at the user. The user has to look at a law, which I don't want them to go to a lawyer first of all. This is a process they can do without a lawyer. I want them to start it right there. They will have to go to a lawyer to just understand what they're supposed to do under the law. I mean, this, I'm just saying, this over legislating a process, which is something which is, I'm again, terminology in terms of legislation, which I'm sure you heard me say that. I will put it out again. In India, we have a law, I say is the best law on mediation. And the judiciary, the lawyers, even the mediator say we don't have a law on mediation. Can you imagine this difference? It's all terminology. Terminology is, our law is called conciliation, because the UNCITRAL conciliation rules of 1980, we adopted them. We were far ahead of our times. In 1996, we got that legislation. Simple, cannot be better. Everything protected, confidentiality protected, without prejudice protected, mediator not being called as a witness protected. They can appoint whom they want. Everything, the best law. And here, we don't have a law, so we should legislate. And when we legislate, we are a colonial mindset. We will legislate and get the government in somewhere. We'll get the judiciary. We'll make a mediation council of India, where nothing is happening in relation to mediation except the court system. And even, I mean, you want to, hi, Elsidine, how are you? Her session is at 7:30. And
Fine. I'm nervous. I don't speak English, Vikram.
no problem. We'll listen to you in Portuguese. And Adi, we were just talking about that. The language is not an issue. So,
Okay, Adi.
Hello, Alcine.
so that is, look, here you have an example. So
Today is Carnival in Brazil.
So let's go there, Alcine. What are we doing discussing language and mediation? Let's go out to the carnival. I think that's really
Vikram, it's just too late to for our session today to discuss all the things that you raised, and I am tempted to. I mean, I know I know we're not completely synced in that sense. I know that legislation and framework for. But let me make this point, and it goes back to the language we use to describe our own assessment of the need for legislation or whatever type of legislation, and our ability to really explain why that would be useful or not, or we think it will be useful or not. So one of the things that we have to recognize is that the mediation activity is as old as the world. It's like it has been around for ages. In wherever there were three human beings, probably at some point one of them was kind of carrying the role of the mediator at some point in time. Now, we know that some 50 years ago, the whole concept turned towards the professionalism, towards the professional activity of a mediator, while the role of the mediator has been fulfilled in different roles by different CEOs or managers or human resource people or whatever. Almost every single activity, if not every single activity, would include a kind of a mediation role, the role of a mediator in some sense. So being able to recognize that, I think it's important. Then we will have to see that one of the ways that folks have imagined that this could be implemented is in relation with the court system, because of the government's challenges in ensuring enough resources for the administration of justice. So they said, okay, let's think about how we could use this to do a better job in administrating the justice sector. So that is a perspective that cannot be ignored. Now, in that respect, where we see the public dimension, because that becomes public, it is not a private initiative anymore. It involves the public, it involves the government, it involves the court system. Then, obviously, the more you feed into that, the more the conversation about regulation becomes more valid. So we should discuss how things could be related to the court system, because the court system is regulated, because it is being funded through public funds and so on and so forth. It's critical. Now, the more requirements are being legislated for private parties and natural persons to use this, the more regulation is needed then, so that no one will abuse it. Just to give you an example, is there a required effort that I would attend a mediation session? Sure, but how can we make sure that among all the 50,000, 20,000, or whatever that number is of mediators, there will be none abusing that system and charging whatever fees? So then let's regulate it. It goes back to the law. Oh, we should have a law. We should have that kind of a law. That's what I'm saying. So when we say law, when we say legislation, I think we have to really discuss about where exactly do we see the application in relation to the court system, in relation to another area, and so on and so forth. And I will give you examples, and then I'll close with mediation being implemented in different fields of practice, in different industries, being regulated by national parliaments as legislation for the country, or by international organizations as policies for that organization, and then it's defined differently. Different language would be used. So going back, I'm trying to connect this with the point of language, which is the topic for our conversation, because it's how we communicate with each other to kind of explain why different initiatives may be valid in their own sense. And bottom line, there is something behind every initiative. There is, I think, a goal, and once we understand that goal, then I think we're much better prepared to discuss the language that is being used.
I think what we do is let's have a workshop. Let's not call it a symposium. Let's have a workshop on mediation legislation, and let's get views from everyone, and let's try and draft. Let's call it a model mediation law. Let's call it that. We call it that. Let's all sit together and let's put our minds into it. There will be, of course, there'll be thoughts on both sides. I mean, of course, everyone will bring it, but the main thing is all of us want mediation to develop. That's the whole idea. So at least we have a common interest there, and let's work it out. I know that there will be a lot of baggage of the judiciary and the court system, which will come into that discussion. Not a problem. We thrash it all out. What is the problem? We're able to do that. So let's do that. I mean, and not too late, because like I said, I know that India, of course, is going in the wrong direction. Similarly, the same thing might be happening in other countries. So at least we have put our word out. Look, I don't bang my head against these brick walls. I don't. I do my ranting, but I don't break. I will put it out there. Whoever wants to look at it, whichever country wants to look at it, they can look at it. So I think we should do that. But Adi, one word that you used, which was a nice word, which we haven't explored, is heart. Somewhere in your discussion, you used the word heart, and heart in relation to mediation in terms of language. That part you haven't explored. So please, you need to throw some light on that.
And then I'll have to excuse myself for the day. It goes back to how we see our role as mediators. I sometimes use this word consciously because I really want to really be understood in the way that I see myself helping people, which is I'm not only here to really listen to your arguments, including legal arguments. You may share your legal arguments. You may share all the ideas you have in terms of getting this result. Different ideas may be coming from the other side. But I want to make sure that someone is actually listening to how you feel about all that. And I hear you're, discussing damages, and I hear you're, but I'm telling you something, Vikram. I did have in my practice many people saying, we're claiming damages. But sometimes they say, it's not like, I cannot wake up tomorrow morning without, this amount of money that I'm requesting. As a matter of fact, I can leave without this amount of money. And I will tell you this as a mediator, as a party. But it's a matter of principle. And they need to know that, they're under their own actions created a situation. They need to acknowledge their own intervention, their own actions, and to do something about it. Well, and that will help me as a mediator really understand that sometimes it's not about the actual claim, but it's about people making sure that they are understood why would they make that claim. And that requires to listen to the arguments of the heart. That's what I would say. You know, that it's not about the reason. You know, the whole accept of ethos, logos, and pathos, right? This is about pathos. This is about really not the laws, not the rules, not the logic or the logos, but really about, you know, why. You know, sometimes people use injustice. That it's not fair, they would say. It's not fair. This has to set things right. Well, and then that for us is a great entry door towards the solution. Because sometimes, as we know, that will take us to what our common mentor and friend, Judge Danny Weinstein, would call as the field. It will be when we land on the field, and we leave the arena and we get to the field. When I know, as a matter of fact, that your heart has been listened by the other, and the other's heart has been listened and understood by you, then I know that we're together there in the field, ready to discuss the future.
Well, I think the important thing, Adi, is that we need people like you who, of course, mediate from the heart, who connect to the heart, and can, of course, you know, when it comes with the heart, soul will also come in and connect to the soul. So that's also important. I know you have to leave. So let's just look at what Danny Weinstein has, what he likes, that somewhere beyond right and wrong, there is a garden. I will meet you there. So that's what I think. So we can, of course, that's a nice place to conclude. But Adi, you have to conclude. Anything else that you want to conclude on?
Yes.
Totally.
One more point, and just to say thank you, obviously, Vikram and whoever watched this, and always a pleasure. I always think about these conversations with you as, you know, conversations that I would have on the corner of the kitchen table with a cup of coffee or tea, whatever. One final comment. It's not only about the heart. Because if we will only make it about the heart, then we will push the pendulum towards the other extreme, and we don't want to do that. As long as we find the right balance for the right case, for the right people, then it's, I think, on the right track, and we will be able to find the right language. So thank you, Vikram, and God bless you and everyone.
Thank you, Adi. And well, I'm just bringing that thing into the discussion, the heart soul, which was totally left out. Whether that has to be the only thing by itself, definitely you're absolutely right. A lot of things come in, but one thing was just left out of the room. Please bring it in. It's all part of the process. Don't disregard it. So that was the only thing. So thank you, Adi. And please, 21st, if you can drop in, please, on the last day, learnings and key takeaways at 10 o'clock, Ken's session at 10:30. So please, yep. So
we'll give it a try. At least we'll take a look at it. Thanks,
exactly.
Vikram, and
see you. Bye.
Everyone, all the best.
Bye. Let me